Now, horror movies aren't exactly supposed to be cheerful, feel-good experiences, but there are certainly times where filmmakers perhaps push the harshness and cruelty too far, particularly in sequels. The following horror sequels all forged ahead into nastier, more mean-spirited directions than their predecessors. Does this mean they're all terrible or even bad movies? Absolutely not. But the tonal whiplash felt by experiencing them is at times staggering. With that in mind, I'm Andrew from What Culture Horror, and here are 10 horror movie sequels that were just too cruel. Number 10, Hostel Part 2. Now, the first Hostel movie wasn't a compassionate picnic in the park, of course, but Part 2 takes the cruelty to a whole other level. For starters, the sequel kicks off by brutally killing the rather likeable Paxton from the first film, by having him decapitated by a member of the elite hunting club. But it only gets more agonizing from there, and Hostel Part 2's most memorable death scene sees the sweet, naive Lorna kidnapped, stripped, and hung upside down before a woman slits Lorna's throat and nakedly bathes in the blood as it rains down on her. Very gnarly stuff. Eli Roth easily endears the audience to Lorna and makes you root for her survival, only for her to die in the most prolonged and messed up death of the entire movie. Between that and Paxton's death, Hostel Part 2 is a mean-spirited movie, even by Eli Roth standards. Number 9, Saw 3. Though the Saw franchise has often been tarred with the same torture porn brush as Hostel, the series started off decidedly more restrained. Truthfully, it wasn't until maybe Saw 3 that it truly started to push the brutality to nauseating levels. Saw 3 famously introduced the gnarliest trap in the series up to that point, the rack, where poor Timothy has his limbs and neck twisted by a machine until he's dead. But more than that, Saw 3 also marked the point in which a number of unwinnable, unfair traps were introduced, as engineered by Jigsaw's apprentice, Amanda. Detective Kerry, who many felt might be the one to take down Jigsaw and Amanda, is instead hastily killed off early in the movie when placed in a literally unbeatable trap. And then there's Jeff, who, quite reasonably pissed off at Jigsaw for placing him in this situation, slices Kramer's throat with a power saw, causing Jeff to lose his final test. Jeff's penalty? His wife Lynn's head is blown off when Jigsaw flatlines, and their kidnapped daughter is locked away within the warehouse. Because that's not harsh enough, Saw 4 later reveals that Jeff never even made it out of the warehouse, instead being shot dead by Agent Strom. Number 8, Scream 2022. Hey, because according to the comment section, we can't do a horror list without referencing a Scream movie. But at least the fifth Scream made a concerted effort to dispense with the pattern of safety which the franchise had fallen into. Namely, that Sidney, Dewey, and Gale were basically untouchable. 2022 Scream goes much further than that though, as in the span of around 15 minutes in the middle of the movie, 3 of its most innocent or likable characters get brutally killed off. First, there's Judy Hicks, the adorable sheriff introduced in Scream 4, who's killed in broad daylight while racing to check on her son Wes. Then, mere minutes later, Ghostface heads inside and kills Wes, stabbing him through the throat and watching him bleed to death. And the grim pièce de résistance, well, that's Dewey himself, the series' beloved veteran cop who gets fatally gutted when he, rather foolishly, leaves the safety of a hospital elevator to finish off Ghostface. Dewey's death in particular proved hugely divisive among the fan base. For though Scream 2022 didn't pull its punches, this trilogy of mean-spirited kills transcended slasher movie fun to leave many just kinda bummed out. Number 7, Alien 3. Alien 3 is, in many respects, the textbook example of a sequel which seemed determined to thumb its nose at as many fans as humanly possible. The film, of course, kicks off with Aliens fan favourites Newt and Hicks being killed off-screen, which didn't exactly set things off on a great footing. Though there's actually a rock-solid movie within the core of Alien 3, it's capped off with an ending which remains extremely polarising. Those final moments see Ellen Ripley plunge herself into a furnace to prevent Weyland Yutani from acquiring the alien queen that eventually bursts out of her. On one hand, Alien 3 feels like a pretty concrete ending to the whole Alien franchise, but on the other, it's a film that holds a shockingly flippant regard for its most beloved characters. Ripley dying is certainly the lesser of the three evils though, with Newt's shock demise coming off as especially cruel, enough that some fans just straight up don't consider that canon. Number 6, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. Now, you can argue that the sixth Halloween movie, The Curse of Michael Myers, is just a sick joke against fans, but it also made the fatal mistake of not only killing off the most sympathetic hero left standing, but doing so in an overwhelmingly harsh fashion. After Jamie Lee Curtis ducked out of the franchise, protagonist duties were handed over to Laurie Strode's young daughter, Jamie Lloyd. Yet, after impressively surviving 2 run-ins with her murderous uncle in the 4th and 5th movies, and now 15-year-old Jamie's number finally comes up in The Curse of Michael Myers. Death, though, it's just one of the horrific indignities to befall Jamie Lee. Here, she's forcibly impregnated with Michael's son, as revealed in the producer's cut of the film, and shortly after giving birth to that baby boy, she is unceremoniously murdered by the Shape. This is just an all-round horrible outcome for a character fans were firmly rooting for, and that Daniel Harris wasn't even offered enough money to return and complete Jamie's arc, that makes it even worse. Just awful. Number 5, Wrong Turn 5, Bloodlines. Even accepting that all but the most die-hard gorehounds largely bounced off the Wrong Turn series long before this point, the 5th movie is the epitome of F you and your feelings. While Wrong Turn 2 Dead End found a surprisingly nimble niche of dark comedy, the franchise ditched this for all subsequent sequels, the most unbearingly savage of which is Wrong Turn 5, Bloodlines. This is a movie that doesn't really want you to enjoy the backwater schlock, it wants you to feel genuinely bad by witnessing its most affable characters suffer truly horrific fates. Case in point, the 3rd act sees the town sheriff, Angela, forced to choose between burning to death or triggering a shotgun to blow her own head off. She ultimately chooses the latter, if you can call it much of a choice. And then there's the final girl, Lita, who has her eyes stabbed out by cannibal Grandpa Maynard before being bundled into his car with his grandsons. The implication here being that they will sexually abuse and torture her. Utterly gross. Number 4, The Fly 2. The Fly 2 can't even begin to hold a candle to David Cronenberg's mesmerizing predecessor, obviously. While Cronenberg's film had a surprising tenderness to it beneath all the goopy body horror, the sequel, yeah, not so much. For one, the movie opens with the original film's surviving hero Veronica dying while giving birth to a son she was impregnated with by her late mutated lover Seth Brundle. Yet director Chris Wallace arguably goes even harsher later in the movie, when security guard Mackenzie has his face melted by Veronica and Seth's son, Martin. Rather than simply die though, Mackenzie claws away at his own face as he acid eats through it, blinding him and melting away his tongue, but somehow still not killing him, the poor fella. Despite the seemingly fatal nature of this injury, Mackenzie can be seen breathing heavily on the ground as the rest of the security staff enter the room. And because that's not enough, Martin even walks over him as he exits the area. For as impressive as The Fly 2's gore effects are, its mean streak is a small part of what ultimately makes it far inferior to David Cronenberg's original. Number 3, Puppet Master, The Littlest Reich. The Puppet Master series has admittedly never been much concerned with good taste, but even so, 2018's Puppet Master The Littlest Reich crossed the line for some audiences with one unforgettably traumatizing kill. The scene in question involves one of the dolls crawling inside a pregnant woman through her, only for the woman to wake up in agonizing pain just as the doll bursts out of her stomach, rips her dead fetus out of her womb, and walks off with it, placenta and all. Just absolutely no thanks. Granted, such edginess shouldn't be massively surprising given that The Littlest Reich was written by S. Craig Zahler, director of such unforgiving thrillers such as Bone Tomahawk, Brawl in Cell Block 99, and Dragged Across Concrete. But all the same, some found this a little too much, even in a series as fundamentally crass as the Puppet Master franchise. Number 2, The Descent Part 2. Now, in fairness, The Descent's original ending was itself incredibly bleak, revealing that Sarah was in fact still trapped inside the monster-infested cave, seemingly confined to a grim fate. But The Descent Part 2, that instead took the far sunnier US ending of The Descent as canon, where Sarah actually escaped, only for her to suffer another unsavory fate by the sequel's end. Indeed, this is a Takes No Prisoners follow-up, which makes the brave or stupid decision to kill off the original film's 2 surviving characters in its climax, as well as the remaining new hero. Returning character Juno ends up being fatally wounded by one of the crawlers. Sarah sacrifices herself to distract the crawlers to give the only other survivor, that'd be new character Rios, a chance to escape, and that might seem like a fitting end for Sarah, except that the final scene shows Rios being knocked out by Old Man Ed and dragged back into the cave, making it all feel a bit pointless and, well, nasty. And finally, if you haven't seen The Exorcist Believer yet, be warned, there are major spoilers next. Number 1, The Exorcist Believer. David Gordon Green's direct sequel to the original 1973 Exorcist sadly makes a number of missteps which, while bold, ultimately leave you frustrated and annoyed, a little bit like certain elements of his Halloween trilogy. First and foremost, Green managed to coax the brilliant Ellen Burstyn back to reprise the role of Chris McNeil a half-century later, only to have her character receive some absolutely loathsome treatment. For starters, Chris has been estranged from her daughter Regan for decades due to writing a memoir about her experiences in that first film. But far more egregiously, Chris is eventually blinded when one of the two demonically possessed girls, Catherine, stabs her in the eyes. Perhaps even worse than this though, yeah, at the end of the movie, the demon presents the parents of the girls with a choice to pick which one will live and which one will die. Catherine's father, Tony, ends up choosing Catherine, only for the demon, because he's a funny sort, to reveal that the chosen child would be the one to die, not survive, at which point Catherine is dragged to hell. If not strictly the worst of all of the Exorcist follow-ups, The Exorcist Believer is surely the most tonally off-kilter, taking the inherent hope of William Friedkin's original and tossing it out almost completely, despite what its flowery final moments might try to tell you. So, that's our 10 horror movie sequels that were just too cruel. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, turn those notification bells on, and come and give us a follow on X at What Culture Horror. Right there, you can find myself at Culture Left Peg, but most importantly, just be sure to have the best possible day. Whether you're doing something or whether you're doing absolutely nothing at all, I hope it goes really well for you. And if things aren't going so well and you're having a bit of a rough time, I really do hope that turns around for you as soon as possible. I've been Andrew Paul from What Culture Horror, and I'll catch you down the road.